Good afternoon and welcome to today's episode of, just getting a little set here. Okay, let's start over. Good afternoon, welcome to 5 Reasons Not to Harm Your Family During Quarantine. I am sorry for the delay in starting today. There's a lot going on and I wanted to make sure that I got some last minute information for you. And as you can see, I'm sitting outside and I'm not in the sun, but it's just really lovely to breathe this fresh air and look at the daffodils and the tulips. And, as challenging as staying at home is, there's a lot of wonderful, fantastic things happening in nature that in our regular lives we would probably be too busy to notice. I read an article this morning about how in Florida they've had just an abundance of sea turtle nests on the beaches, and these the turtles are have become on the watch list and are protected, and in a lot of areas where they nest, you can't even have any streetlights on in those areas during their season that they mate and build their nests and that the turtles hatch. And they've had such a increase. It really is fascinating to see that what people do to nature in a harmful way that we wouldn't even think about just by going to the beach. So that was an interesting tangent for this morning. What I wanted to talk about first, we'll get our statistics out of the way. Governor Whitmer will be talking at 4 p.m. today. Mayor Duggan will be talking at 2. They're now monitoring statistics in the nursing homes, the elder care, and some of those assisted living. As everyone knows, there's been a huge effort in Detroit initiated by Mayor Duggan to test the people living there, working there, coming in and out, very strict limitations. And there's really, that's kind of a hotbed right now, right up there with our jails, which although they released all these inmates to try to control the virus, they now, I believe, at least 5 counties are reporting, multiple cases. The latest cases have come out of Washtenaw County Jail. And I don't have updated numbers on Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Genesee, but they were definitely on the rise. And so in other episodes, we talked about why it's scary and dangerous for COVID-19 if you're in custody, and the risks that exist there. This was another really interesting thing about today. As you all know, March is like a really big Girl Scout cookie month, one of my personal favorite treats. And, a lot of these troops have all these cookies to sell, and they couldn't sell them because they weren't allowed to be out in front of grocery stores or their usual stands, as they say. And in Alaska, the government has given the Girl Scouts a grant to reimburse them for all their cookies that they couldn't sell. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Other things, a lot of people out there doing really kind things, making sandwiches, taking them to homeless people. Giant hearts right now, just really all around. Statistics. This is kind of cool. There have been 3,315 deaths, and that is only up 40 deaths since, this is yesterday's numbers, so since Saturday. And there are now 37,778 cases And from Saturday to Sunday, that's only up 500. Where if you remember last week, the week before, we were up 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, really big jumps. So stay home, it's working. As everybody knows, we have a new stay-at-home order. And just quickly, I have a couple of, little frequently asked questions. Most important one for our usual topics are, how does the order impact my custody agreement? Individuals may travel as required by law enforcement or a court order, including the transportation of children pursuant to a custody agreement. It doesn't have to be an order. It can be an agreement. The court-ordered parent-child visits and caseworker visits continue, but these visits must not always be in person. And that not always be in person just really bums me out. Alternatives can be telephone, video conference, and time an in-person visit is required is when we believe that child safety is at stake, is the official answer as of the new order. DHHS has not released a statement if anything's going to change with kids in foster care. As you may recall, all reunification efforts for children in foster care to return to their parents came to a screeching halt with the first stay-home order. And in a lot of those cases, kids have been really adversely affected, where they were, with their parents 5 days and 5 nights a week. And because of the order, they then were with their foster parents, and their parents were visiting by FaceTime or one of the other, Skype, Zoom, whatever. But think about a 2-year-old having a video visit as opposed to being with their parents, 5 days and 5 nights a week. And it's just, it's heartbreaking. So hopefully, the timelines that are on those abuse and neglect cases, the timelines for how long a child can remain in foster care, how long parents have to get their proverbial shit together to have their children removed, those haven't been extended. And so we're in kind of a wait and see what's going to happen with those families and if they will be able to be reunified, and the steps that we'll have to take to convince a court of that in this kind of crazy time. So let's see, what other ones? Hotels and motels are allowed to remain open, but they have a limited function of operation. They are to provide housing alternatives for first responders or for needy individuals who need temporary or permanent housing or shelter. So that was kind of interesting. Some forms of construction are now available. Roads, bridges, telecommunications, and public health were always allowed, but now you can, in limited cases, you can do some home repair. And as everyone knows, thankfully, the garden centers are open, and you can take care of your own garden and make it look pretty, or have a landscaper come and cut your lawn and plant your flowers. It's a little ironic because it's so nice outside, so it's really, and we have more time at home, obviously, so it's tempting to plant all your flowers right now and just be done, get it over with. You won't be like July and oh my god, I didn't plant the cucumbers, but it still could frost, so we probably should still wait because it's Michigan. But I'm not a master gardener. I'll leave that up to you guys who know more than I do. But I just, as I'm sitting here looking at all my empty pots on my porch, it would be really nice if they had flowers in them, but I'm still waiting. Okay, so today's topic is going to be kind of one of the things that is going to happen after this is all over is it's anticipated that there will be a surge in divorce filing and in people trying to find alternatives to their current living arrangement, whatever that may be. And so some of the things to think about, first and foremost, is your children, and custody and decision-making. There's two different kinds of custody. There's legal custody and there's physical custody. Legal custody are the big decisions. It's the religion of the child. It's if they're going to go to private school or public school, if they're going to have a certain kind of surgery. The physical custody is where they live and the day-to-day decision making. It's homework, it's projects, it's extracurricular activities, where they're going to sign up. You have to be careful that they don't interrupt parenting time or that the other parent is on board. But, just some things to think about. So physical custody is more the logistics. And in the years ago, we always had a language in a judgment that said that the parents have either joint or this one has it or this one has it for legal custody. And then we had a similar statement about physical custody. Well, not all judgments of divorce actually talk about physical custody anymore. Now, there's been a change in the trend, and we talk about primary residence. Because both parents should share custody and both parents have parenting time. It's not like the days of old where one had visitation. We don't visit our own kids. We parent our own kids. So just some things to think about. If you're going to split residences, what are your child's favorite things? Are you going to need them at both residences? And how are you going to accomplish that? Are you going to get along well enough with your soon-to-be ex to have fruitful discussions in the best interest of your child or your children? Also, you need to talk about geographic issues. If there's going to be a relocation out of state, that with the children or without the children, that's going to be a different picture that we have to create for how life is going to continue. So you want to think about that. If you're someone that travels for work, is it possible for you to do your travel schedule so that it syncs with your parenting time schedule, or your parenting time schedule so it syncs with your work travel schedule? These are all things to think about. The more you think about before you file or while you're making your decision, the less expensive it's going to be, first of all, and the easier it will be. It's always stressful. Nobody wins. It's hard on everyone. So these are just some tips to make it a little more tolerable. It's really helpful if you are getting ready to make this kind of decision, that you make a list of all the doctors, all the teachers, all the dentists, all the extracurricular activities that your kids are involved in, if they go to camp, if they're planning on going to college, if they have any tutoring, if they, just anything in their daily life that is kind of assumed and presumed because you live as a unit, need to make sure that they have that consistency. If they study do their homework on a desktop computer, you're going to have to make sure that there's a desktop computer or a laptop or something at the other parent's home, if that's the direction you're going in. Think about how you're going to live while it's pending. Those because some days are going to be super, super stressful. So is there some place that one of you can go for respite? Are you going to just immediately do, like, I live in the house this week and you live in the house next week and I move back the next week, sort of a nesting, the kids just stay there? Are you going to have 2 residences? Can you afford to have 2 residences? And then the kids go back and forth? How old are your kids? Kids 13, 14-ish and up, they get a say. Their say isn't the be-all, end-all, but they definitely have some say in what's happening. And then you get into things, and you need to be ready for this as a parent, because kids who are 13, 14, 15, high school, they don't want to go to parenting time. They want to go hang with their friends. So as parents, you have to be ready to accept that. You have to be, it's not a battle of who gets more time with their teenagers between the parents. It's really, how are we going to co-parent and let them continue to have their social relationships, their own outlets, because they have to cope with this change too. And they didn't get a say in this change. So it's super important to really keep child focused or young adult focused or teenage focused, whatever it is. Remember that especially, pre-adolescents, adolescents, not only would this be a huge change in their physical surroundings, but they're going through their own physical changes. And, the rush of hormones and the changing bodies and all that stuff. So, you can't ever stop being child focused and what's really going on with them. And you need to think about these things before you file. We talked about a minute ago about access and parenting time. Both parents parent. It can be weekdays, it can be weekends, it can be holidays, it can be long weekends, it can be school recesses, summer vacations, birthdays. What are you going to do on parents' birthdays? What are you going to do on the child's birthday? What are you going to do on the sibling's birthday? Other occasions. Is there going to be unlimited telephone contact? Is there going to be, how are you going to go about changing parenting time? Do you have a good enough relationship to just call and communicate? Do you need some sort of court-monitored communication tool like Family Wizard? What happens if you can't figure out a schedule that works? And at that point, when people can't agree on how to switch their parenting time, that's when I give my clients a big speech about, is this like the battle of wills between the two of you? I mean, obviously, you're not like great husband and wife, but you still have to be great parents. So stop it. Talk about it. Figure it out. I don't want to file motions because, this parent had planned a trip and it was this parent's weekend, and this parent won't switch to one weekend later when they had really no plans. They just started the power struggle. So, that's something that you have to think about. And also, unlike other areas of law, when you are in family law, when you are in this emotionally charged, crazy world of untying the knot, and every one of those little strings that make up the rope have some significance. This is probably the only time when your lawyer, underneath their name, sometimes it says attorney and counselor. Well, we're your counselor, but we're not your therapist. And you will need more than just your lawyer to support you through this if you're not prepared. Because there will be challenges. And you're also going to have situations when you hate your lawyer because you don't think we're doing it fast enough. You don't think that we're fixing things that you don't think are right. You don't like the judge's decision. I mean, there's a lot of people on the team whose hands are tied, but are all doing the best they can for you. So it's super important to understand the dynamic of the interplay between you, your soon-to-be ex-spouse, your children, your lawyer, their lawyer, the judge, the family counselor at the court, the the support specialist at the court, if there's psychologists involved, if there's, there can be a number of people who all make up this team. So those are all things to think about. Another thing to think about is grandparenting time. If you have a parent who lives with their parent and they're not able to exercise their parenting time because of their job or whatever, are we going to let grandparents have that time instead? Or maybe the parent's just gone, and then are you going to have a shared custody or parenting arrangement with a grandparent or some other relative? Who has been the kinship care for this child? Who's been involved all the time? So those are just things to think about. As for support, you want to think about, your own children, and you want to think about what their financial needs are, because we have a formula and we put in a lot of we put in people's earnings, we put in their bonuses, we put in who pays for the child care, who pays for the health care. We put in how many overnights each parent will have throughout the year, and how many kids there are, how old they are, and then you kind of push a button and you get these numbers. And the child support guidelines, which are the Michigan child support guidelines, they're guidelines. They're not the be-all and end-all. So depending on your child and your child's needs and the rest of your settlement, that number may be in the guidelines, maybe higher than the guidelines, maybe lower than the guidelines. So, that's just all important stuff to keep in mind when you're looking at it. If you're a parent with not a lot of overnights, you're going to pay a ton of support. A lot of time, in a lot of courts, there's a presumption that parents will co-parent and that they will have a pretty equal amount of overnights. And if that's the case, then there may not be any support, regardless of any child support, regardless of the disparity in income of the parties. Or there may be. It just depends. Maybe one pays for extracurricular activities, the other one pays for camp. One pays for the tutor. You can work it out any way that you want. It's just, but you got to think about it. You got to think about those expenses and how much you're going to have to pay to continue the quality of your children's lives, even if you're not living together, and how that's going to be accomplished. You also want to think about if there are bonuses, or if there's commission, if there's someone self-employed. How do you verify that income? How do we even start the calculation? And it's not just by the expenses, but the expenses is a really good indicator. So certainly gathering bank statements, credit card statements, for all accounts, investment accounts, retirement accounts, all the statements you can find, and having those gathered is a great pre-step. Another thing is, know how much it costs to live in your house. Get a mortgage statement, get utility bills, get the cable bill. Figure out exactly what that expense is. How much does it cost to have your lawn cut? How much does it, just whatever the different things are. Because that is certainly going to play into the settlement with the decision of, could I even afford to keep living in my house, even if I love my house? Or should we just put it on the market now, and so we can each take our equity and start over? A lot of people hold on to that house. That's my children's house. That's where they grew up. That's, Children are extremely resilient, and sometimes selling the house and having two new houses for children where everything is new is it can be a great thing. It could also be a bad thing. We don't know. It depends on the kids. But, so that's important. You also want to talk about, child support is only required by law to be paid until children are 18, or if they're not done with high school, till they're 19 and a half. So, you want to look at your children's future, and are they planning on going to college? Are they going to go to tech school? Are they going to do an apprenticeship? Are there college funds, that Met funds? Are we going to continue to contribute to them separately? Or is one person just going to be responsible for that? So again, that's, private school tuition is another one. Who's going to pay it? What, how much of it? What about that field trip? What about the class party, the senior t-shirt, the all-night party, the sign that goes on your lawn when you graduate? Really, like I said, the more prepared you are before you do it, before you walk in and say, I want to end my relationship, the easier and less expensive it's going to be. Medical insurance, who pays for it? If the spouse, if it's a family plan and it's one spouse gets it as a benefit of employment, after the divorce is final, that spouse is responsible for giving the other spouse access to the plan through COBRA. COBRA is expensive, but a person can stay on that insurance even though they're not married, pay their premium themselves. It doesn't come out of their spouse's paycheck anymore, for, I believe, up to a year. Like I said, it's expensive. So that isn't usually what people choose to do. There's also, things to think about under insurance coverage. Are your kids going to need braces? Is it going to be covered? Are they going to need glasses? Are they going to need therapy? So you want to be thinking about, really a lot of the things that, might happen or could happen, in talking about medical. You also want to talk about spousal support. Obviously, if there's an income disparity, that becomes an issue. And, there's two schools of thought: that the non-working spouse, has worked blood, sweat, and tears for all these years and is entitled to be supported at least to a point of rehabilitation where they can stand on their own 2 feet and support themselves. Most cases, it's like a third. So it's the amount of time, if someone, just for number's sake, if someone was married for 18 years and one spouse didn't work, the other spouse would probably be paying spousal support for 6 years. And there's a formula, very similar information as goes into the child support formula, but obviously the amount of overnights doesn't matter. And it's going to it's going to just be pretty much based on income, length of marriage, degrees that people have or have achieved. Could they be working? Just because you've had, you didn't have to work out of the home while you were married doesn't mean that you still get to not work out of the home now that you're not married. So those are also considerations. You also want to talk about and think about your property. You want to think about your house, your mortgage, your taxes, your utilities, your insurance, any repairs that need to be done. You want to, think about who's going to get it, if you're going to sell it. I already talked about that. You may want to be familiar with other homes in your area, how much they've sold for. Is this a good market, a bad market? All those things are going to matter. And then you also want to think about both in terms of of spousal support and the real estate, you want to think about, what happens if one of you remarries. Like, say you say that, like, you're going to live in the house until the kids graduate from high school, and one of you remarries before the kids graduate from high school. Okay, so in that scenario, is one of you buying the other one out? Are you just maintaining a lien? Are you selling the house before that? So these are just things to think about. This doesn't come up in every divorce situation, but it does come up in some. So you're home, you have a lot of time on your hands, things to think about. You want to determine, if you are the one moving out of your home, what could you afford and how much money do you need to be able to afford that? Whether that's going to be money coming from your spouse as in the form of spousal support, or if that's going to be money like you have to go get a job. And you can't count child support in that number. Child support is for your children. Yes, it can go towards helping to put the roof over their head, but it's not the whole thing. And we need to keep that in mind. You want to also, I always recommend to people, when you're thinking about these things, untying the knot, you really, 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 really need to know what stuff you have. Not just financial stuff and insurance stuff. Walk around your house with a video camera, with your phone with the video, and open every drawer, open every closet, and just video what you have. If you inherited your grandma's china and it's been sitting in your basement for 5 years, you're probably not thinking about it every day, but it's probably something that you will want when there's the property division. If your great grandpa has a Mickey Mantle rookie card that he gave you, upon his passing, you want to make sure that you remember that that's there and you don't just leave. Jewelry should be inventoried. There should be, you need to be able to identify any collectibles, the furniture. What about the family photographs? What about the pictures of your kids? What about the dog? A lot of times the dog travels with the children, and that is like really easy as long as both people live where they can have the dog. Dogs are huge, or pets, I should say. I didn't mean to be prejudiced against, the turtles, the fish, and the cats, and the, what are those things called that look like squirrels? Not really. Teresa's on this call, and she lives on a farm, and so she could definitely tell me what I'm thinking of. They're kind of rat-ish, but cuter, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, she has roosters at her house. Her kids get to play with roosters and chickens and all kinds of cool stuff, but I tangent. Back to what we were talking about. You'll want to remember that in Michigan, we are a marital property state. So what that means, we are a no-fault state. So what that means is that anything you owned before the marriage is your separate property, okay? Anything from the day you got married till the day the judgment of divorce is entered is 50-50, both of you, with exceptions for some inherited property. So those are things to also keep in mind. What is my separate property that I had premarital, and what is our marital property, and what is inherited property? One of the things that becomes very confusing is, what if you are not retirement age, and right now the amount of appreciation in a retirement fund, a 401k, or an IRA, or a pension, whatever it is, through your employer, or that you have yourself, the amount of appreciation from the day you got married till the day the judgment of divorce is entered, unless you agree otherwise, is going to be divided 50-50. If you're under retirement age, there would obviously be a tax penalty and possibly a financial loss if it was pulled out of the plan. So a lot of times, instead of splitting the retirement plan, we offset the other spouse's portion with other property. Like maybe you get more equity in the house, or maybe you get, the Mustang. I don't know. But if you do need to split the retirement assets, then something called a quadro, which is QDRO, or an EDRO, EDRO, which are domestic retirement orders. And that basically says, this is the value that we're splitting. We're going to split it like this, and it will be kept as a qualified non-taxable plan intact until it can be taken out. And then this person gets this amount and this person gets the rest. And so there is that extra step if you are dividing a retirement plan. So it's really important for us to know if you have one, if your spouse has 1, 2, 3, government employees, pilots, airline employees, teachers, any educator, they have special plans. Some are federal, some are state. And they have unique characteristics of how they have to be split and how we figure out the value of them. So those are questions that are going to be asked of you that you're going to have to figure out. Now, before I realize I've probably just sent many of you into deep panic mode, we don't have to know all of this and have all these documents before we start the process of untying the knot. What we need is to know about as much of them as we can, just that they exist, so that we can plan for some temporary orders if necessary, temporary support, temporary parenting time, that a status quo order where the bills will continue to be paid, tuition will continue to be paid, whatever it may be. And then we can, through the discovery procedures, we can ask for the documents, or we can subpoena the documents, and we can get all the absolute accurate values through other means after it's filed. So don't panic at that point. Other things to think about are your tax return. If you have children, it will take a minimum of 6 months from the day you file to have your divorce finalized, unless there's special circumstances, and we can waive the 6-month period of time. If you are just getting a divorce without children or without minor children, then it can be 60 days. So you want to think about how you're going to file your tax return for last year or for the current year, depending on how those time limits fall. And obviously you should be talking to a tax specialist to figure out what's best for you, for your family, and your spouse. And then, unfortunately, some people have to file bankruptcy at the same time as they're filing divorce. Again, you need to consult a bankruptcy specialist to see if that's the best move for you and your debt, because you're not only separating your assets, you're also separating your debt and your liabilities, and how that's going to play out, timing, do you do it together, do you do it separate, all of those things you can think about too. The last thing that I think is super important for people to do when they're thinking about it, and I did talk about it already once just for a second a few minutes ago, but know how much it costs for you to live. Know your own budget. Know how much it costs for you personally. How much do you spend at Target? How much do you spend at the grocery? How much do you spend buying like that cute little scarf over there? How much do you spend on manicures, haircuts, at your health club, your trainer, your, new bike that has a subscription that goes with it? How much are your utilities? What utilities do you have? What memberships do you have? Just figuring out how much it costs for you to live, both individually and as a family, is really helpful when we start to untie the knot. So, this is a stressful time for everyone, and even after May 15th, if we don't have a stay-at-home order, which seems really scary to me that we would be out of here that fast, but I think that everyone, again, just be grateful, and just try to think before you react. A lot of people experiencing a lot of different things at different times of the day, and I think it's really important, even your kids, your spouse, no matter what the state of your relationships, your grandma, just check in. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, this can be hard, and sometimes just making that phone call is a great pick me up for people who are struggling. So with that, I'll give you the 5 reasons again, and that is: number 1, protective services workers are essential. Number 2, the police are essential. Number 3, one more thing. There is a fine if you're not wearing a mask in public. And I'm sorry, I don't know the amount, but that is a new thing. Number 3, our jails and prisons are a breeding ground for COVID-19, and there's no room anyway. And number 4, kids can get in trouble for being kids, and their parents will get in trouble too. And finally, 5th, not very many people, if anyone, look good in horizontal orange stripes. And with that, I hope that you all stay home, stay healthy, enjoy this beautiful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye. Mwah.